A mental health break. We're going live again. It's another week of doing this, so it's a lot of fun for me. This is a mental health break, and today we're joined by a familiar face. If you watch Writing with Authors, she came out with an incredible book, praised all over Forbes, everywhere, and her book is Unstuck, which went bestseller. And if you felt stuck in your life, she's going to have some personal antidotes. Mental health also carries over into her career. So we're going to talk a lot about that. But Helen, thank you so much for joining me on a second show.
Oh, you're so welcome, Vincent. Happy to be here.
Oh, and we always make it work across the pond, and we find time still here to go. But as I mentioned today, Helen is an absolute rock star with a bestseller. She has her practice, but it really, after talking with her, learned all the mental health overlaps. So we're going to get into all of that. But I first have to welcome everyone who's tuning in, viewing in, whether live or when the show is released. My name is Vincent A. Lancey, and I want to thank you for tuning in each week and helping make this show a top 5% global podcast. We cannot do it without courageous guests like Helen and amazing listeners like yourselves. Everyone, I always like starting with a little bit of a personal story before we dive into this. And I learned through connecting with Helen that becoming a new mother while navigating her career and facing a health hiccup, that wasn't easy. If you don't mind, let's revisit that point in time from wherever you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 points in time, actually. I may as well just speak to both of them because I suspect with the amount of listeners that you have, they'll be very relatable to different people for different reasons. The first one, I would call it, I guess, as a career crossroads. I had become pretty senior in my public relations career. I look back now and sort of think of that as a 20-year tour of duty in sort of global PR shops, always in London for me. But what happened at the junction of motherhood was my whole world shifted and I really hadn't seen it coming. So I thought I was going to be one of those people that my career matters to me. It's my, I feel absolutely defined by it at that time. This is me thinking. So I worked hard to sort of replace myself quickly and efficiently from the mothering so that I could juggle both and keep my career on track. Which really didn't work at all because what happened is I couldn't have seen coming this sort of very powerful pull to be present for my little one. And I became very aware of the reasons. My own mum had died when I was a teenager, and I know that shapes and influences you in so many different ways. And, and having the background in psychology as I do now, I understand that, experts would call it reinterpreting. What happens is we almost go through that grief again and again at different life stages as different experiences of it come into focus. So for me, becoming a mother myself made it sort of tragic all over again to think of what I'd missed out on, but it also put this onus on, what's most important here is being present. And I think if I unpack that more, perhaps there was some fear there about what if I sort of, disappear in a puff of smoke in the same way that my mother did. I will regret being focused on work. No one is going to put on my headstone, successfully won a pitch in, so-and-so year, or, got great feedback from some client. It's not what life's about. But I didn't have that perspective until I did. So that was very uncomfortable, and I think led me into all sorts of mental health spirals. I think I want to say I sort of went round in circles having words with myself, because that kind of inner conflict isn't easy to navigate. And what happens, I think, for any of us when we are really torn, really conflicted, our identity feels like it's anchored over here, but our time is being forced to be spent over there. It's very uncomfortable. And it's one of the reasons why now in my work, I sort of say actually work-life balance is just not ambitious enough. We owe it to ourselves to be ambitious to actually thrive. And that means tuning into what's most important, which is the process I went through to redesign my own career and what I now help people to do. The second sort of point in time was much more recent, about 5 years ago, where at this point, I am now running a thriving coaching practice. It's sort of many years down the line. And what came to interrupt me this time was my own health hiccup. And it wasn't as serious as my own mother's life and death version, but it was very confronting, because I think you just don't really know how you experience these things until you have to. So that, again, it just puts everything, I think, in really clear focus. So for me, I feel like I was quite lucky, given a cancer diagnosis, that I was being told quickly, look, we're caught it early, you can, have the operation in literally 2 days. And that should be, they needed a bit more information at the time, but, that should be and has been, the end of your health hiccup, and then you get to carry on again. So for me, it felt like, oh, that's an endurance test. I've just got to push through then, is what I'm hearing. But what I noticed was this incredible clarity on the things that mattered most. And I think sometimes we're very good at pushing these thoughts and feelings sort of off to the side, and we don't really engage with them fully until you have to. But I do believe, as a coach, legacy thinking is incredibly powerful. There's probably nothing else that's as powerful, but trying to get somebody artificially into that place as a coach or as a narrative therapist isn't easy. So there I was in that place, and I hope people don't sort of get forced into it like I was. But on the other hand, the thinking, that way of thinking, what do you want to stand for? What do you want to be remembered for? What really matters to you when push comes to shove was what I sort of took out of it. So yeah, there's my two sort of lifelong experiences of that.
I'm putting in the show notes. Well, congratulations on how far you've come and all you've accomplished. I mean, losing a parent young couldn't have been easy, and you just having that warrior mindset where you're not looking at cancer as what the 99% or the masses will. You said, no thanks, we're going to go ahead and we're going to beat this. So big congratulations to how far you've come. Now, it may not be related to that part of recovery, but with mental health recovery in this process, what were some things that you started to do to take care of your mental health, whether they were new or things you've been doing for years?
Oh, do you know, I think it's all about shortlisting, for want of a better word, the things that top up the tanks, and being incredibly choiceful. I think mindful is a word that I find is so overused and a little bit misunderstood, but choiceful about what I would say yes to and no to protect my limited supply of energy. Was what I did. And there's quite a few things that fit under that banner. It was very clearly focused around our little nuclear family, that were undeniably the most important thing to me. Again, so you think about that career crossroads earlier on, it's not like I didn't know that, but I sort of refreshed that, and it was just incredibly powerful. Yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. It's sort of it was a pull that was so magnetic. I couldn't have ignored it or rationalized it away if I'd have tried. Not that I'd wanted to, but it was really interesting. And then the only other thing that really crept in was my other relationships. And what was so interesting was my client relationships, and I didn't disclose at the time because it felt like that would be too much about me. And actually I was able to, with some clever manipulations with the calendar over a couple of key weeks, I was able to sort of maintain my roster through that time. I did pull away from doing all the things it takes to fill my pipeline and get new clients, because that felt too much and the wrong way to make the effort. But those client conversations for an hour at a time, and they will never know, were like oxygen to me. And I think, again, we're circling this point about what's meaningful, what's purposeful, what replenishes the resilience tanks when they're in danger of running low. So it was just a sort of radical clarity, and I lived by it because it felt like It was like a spotlight. Everything else went dark. Those things stayed light. That was a clear North Star for me.
I love how you put that, recognizing when your tanks are running low. And not just recognizing, but acting on it, right? Being intentional. Something I'm doing that relates to what you said before is I've always been intentional with my breaks. I even have them time blocked in the mornings when I do that, or night before bed. But even enjoying life a little more, building entrepreneurship from really 2019. I started in 2015, wasn't really formal until 2019. Up until last year, it's been work 6-7 days a week, not full days because you burn out, but I was okay with that. And now I'm realizing that remember, there is more to life, right? There is other things going on. So I'm
Well,
being
there's
more
that
intentional.
saying, yeah, totally. And I get that. There is that saying, isn't there? It's sort of, are you going to work to live or live to work? And I think it's maybe not something you really evaluate or sort of interrogate your approach to until something happens. And maybe just feeling on the brink of burnout can be enough. And I hope it's enough, because that would be in time to sort of pull back for people. But you're right. It's about not just being aware. Awareness on its own doesn't actually, do anything, serve us.
Yeah.
We need to act. And I think the good news about that is we are the ones who are at choice always. We can always sort of find some small act of resistance to sort of protect ourselves enough. We can't change the circumstances. We certainly can't control other people, but we can put buffers in place. So I'm back to talking about topping up the resilience levels, aren't I? But I think that's, hugely important, for everybody, for anybody. It's just a myth I would love to bust, that anyone is immune to this stuff. We need to feel our feelings, but also learn the tools to navigate and, keep moving through, knowing that they all pass in time, so long as we do.
I appreciate you sharing some of the tools that work for you. I try to stress this every show. What works for some won't work for everyone. So I try to give some new ones in addition to the obvious ones for me, where it's daily exercise, having more good meals than bad in the day. I go through these phases where I'll try to go super strong. But then again, this year I'm human. There's a period of time I even try not to keep dessert in the house because I was watching my diet for months and just got used to it. But now ritualized, right? On Friday, if I want to go get an ice cream, it's going to be done, right? So during the day, being not as hard on myself with little areas in life where I don't need to beat myself up on, where, as you know, as an entrepreneur, we beat ourselves up plenty as it is. So we got to be kind to ourselves in other areas, and to circle all that and excuse me together. If we can't be kind to ourselves and take care of ourselves, how can we possibly support other people in any capacity? Would you agree with that?
Totally. And actually, without wanting to sound promotional, this is the topic of a live that I happen to have going on LinkedIn in a couple of weeks, because I think people don't understand that. Certainly, for me, I'm all about helping seasoned professionals and leaders. It's in that career space, isn't it? But people don't think self-compassion and self-kindness sort of really has a place. I mean, it's a bit borderline whether people understand emotional intelligence and feelings generally have a place, but self-kindness absolutely is your fastest way to repair after a setback, after any kind of little fail, whether it's just not going to the gym or eating the donut or whatever it is. It can be small things, big things. We do find it really oddly hard to be a good friend to ourselves. But actually, that is the secret sauce to success. And I think that perfectionism you mentioned earlier as an entrepreneur, and definitely for career, professionals as well, is, we push ourselves, don't we, to sort of to attain, to achieve. But the problem with self-esteem is you're only ever going to be as good as your last achievement. And if you worked on the self-compassion track instead, even with a fail, you'd be saying, well, so it happened. It's a happening. It's all, that's life, but it's in the past. What can you take away? What would you do another time? What does that tell you matters? And then you can sort of readjust. So
absolutely
yes,
incredible.
with bells on, I agree.
Incredible advice. And now talking about taking care of ourselves and making ourselves happy. This is something that makes me happy. I have a feeling it does for you too. You have this best-selling book we started with Unstuck. I found and still do find writing very therapeutic, where I get in my zone, where when I have it time blocked or however that monthly writing goals or styles are, I just get in there and my mind's off everything. Were there any mental health benefits for you as well?
Oh, totally. It was, I mean, I've said a few times, it was sort of therapeutic to get that book out of my head and onto paper, let alone into the world. I think because those, for me, that process, it was a sort of a formula of career redesign. So for me, that process was something that I'd been baking for about a decade. And
Sure.
it was really rich with lots of different people and coaching relationships, but also my own career redesign. So it that's, I think, probably at the core of why it was so therapeutic, because it's sort of full circle. We're
Sure.
back to meaning, aren't we? Me going through my own career adversities, career crossroads, and getting unstuck was what tipped me into psychology and all the entire career and the coaching practice. So it was sort of making meaning from the hard stuff that I'd been in the grips of and navigated, and it was absolutely therapeutic. But the funny thing is, I find the same again, just writing. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and that involves quite a bit of writing, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
so it's sort of I just get into flow every time. I can look down, have a bit of an idea, think I've spent 10 minutes, look up and it's been hours. And it's really interesting how that happens. And I think linking self-care and mental health, if we can keep notice of where our energy waves are, where we're sort of riding them, and where we just feel drained and depleted and we're fighting against the tide, that's really telling incoming information for what we should spend more time doing, or curate life so that we don't have to. So you mentioned you won't have dessert in the house, and I think you're right. don't need to hear it calling you from the cupboard if that's a pocket of resistance that is too hard to fight. So it's kind of always designing our environment to be a kinder friend to ourselves, to be an ally, really. To that, it was therapeutic. And I think there is positive psychology research that says something like 50% of our sort of hard to sit with feelings will be diluted by the pure act of writing them down. And that's with no psychology knowledge or coaching tools. That's just get it out of your head and down on paper in any way. Yeah.
Creativity is really strong. I don't know if I have the book over here. Do I? Yeah. Okay. So I've got Mr. Lancet. This is a book that I put out before the Biden-Trump election, thinking it would help. This is my adult mental health book and for older students. Chris Bridge, who is the awesome illustrator who did all of this work with cutting out art and whatever, her chapter is on being creative and the mental health benefits for acting creatively, where as a writer, I create with words, and another is a chef creates with food and so forth. So we are all creative in our own way. So I love how you're highlighting that. Now, as we wind down, before I get the contact info, if you can give a piece of advice to anyone who may be struggling today, going through a tough time, what can you offer them?
Do you know, I've got a couple of sort of new clients bouncing around my head, and I'll say to your audience what I've said to both of those. You might feel stuck at an impassable crossroads of some description, and you have to acknowledge that. I'm not here to convince you out of it. It's how you feel. However, it doesn't need to mean you can't take action. You can feel stuck and take action anyway. And I wish that I could sort of give out through the ether this way of reassuring people, you will therefore not stay stuck. That's how we all get unstuck. We try.
And that's it. You got to try, show up for yourself. The hardest thing to do is showing up. And once you're there, you're in the room, you can make it happen. Think of it as like exercising, right? Where, oh, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go for a run. And then once you're there, you're going to do it, right? You're going to get it done. So show up for yourself. Helen, this has been an amazing episode. Everyone, if you missed her Writing with Authors testimonial, they're shorter episodes, but they go right into the book, some tips, why you should add it to your queue. I'll have it in the episode description. Helen, where can we find you online? You mentioned you're active on LinkedIn. Where can we get the book as well?
Yes. So LinkedIn is, I would love to connect with as many people who feel like sort of staying in touch. my website is probably the easiest place to find the book, actually. And the reason I say that is www.helenhannison.com. I've just put together a bunch of sort of quite special offers, but they're only there. So don't go elsewhere. Go to helenhannison.com and sort of find that. But I can give you links for all this to make it easy for people.
Everyone, as always, on the VincentALancey.com page. If you forget her info now, go there when her show's live. I'll have her website, the show, and all of that good stuff, so you can be sure to support. I appreciate you being kind and offering those resources. I know how much time it takes behind the scenes to put out a free resource or two, and as you try to put out more free resources, of course, eventually people are going to be thinking of you as that trusted resource. So keep up the great work. Again, congratulations on how far you've come, overcoming adversity every step of the way, and now inspiring everyone across the world. My name is Vincent A. Lancey, and this is a Mental Health Break. Check out all of the courageous mental health champions at amentalhealthbreak.com. Like, subscribe, let our guest know how she did today. Vincent A. Lancey is my website at vincentalancy.com, Vincent A. Lancey social media. And one shout out for our show partners. John Ford has his new empathy card set, a new empathy app. Be sure to go check him out, johnford.com, and comingalivepodcastproduction.com. With that, we are signing off today from across the pond. Helen, thank you so much.
You're ever so welcome. Thanks for having me.